welcome to Menopause Rescue. I'm Dr. Polly Watson. Midlife women are often caught up in a sea of symptoms. Too often, they're overwhelmed by the lack of support from mainstream healthcare. They're inundated with so-called experts who are selling solutions which may lack credibility. I'm a Menopause Society certified gynecologist with both traditional and functional medicine training. I'm here to guide you through this transition and help you decipher the facts from the fads. Armed with credible information, I hope you are empowered to rescue and restore your health, making the second half of your life your best. Welcome to Menopause Rescue. I'm your host, Dr. Polly Watson, and I'm so excited to have Kate Willis with me today. Kate is such a valuable member of our team, and today we are going to talk about midlife muscle, and maybe the subtitle for this should be Strong Over Skinny. I don't know.
Great thoughts. Yes. I love it.
So important. And so, Kate, one of the things women come in with a lot of times is kind of this, they've got the little 2 or 3 pound pink weights, we'll call them, right? And they're doing a million repetitions with very, very lightweight. And they're like, I'm lifting weights. And we're like, so maybe you could sort of start off by talking about when you're thinking about weight training in midlife, what are you thinking about? What's important? Maybe we can just dive right in there.
First, I always try to set it up as, you're moving. That's great. Keep moving. But if you're spending time, investing time and energy into something and you think it's effective, we want to make sure that you're doing it in a way that's really going to get results. And so that's sort of always how I approach this with people. Not that what you're doing is wrong, but hey, there might be a way to get more out of what you're doing. So this is this whole concept of what we call progressive overload. And that basically just means you are increasing the stress on your muscles over time. And the goal is to get stronger, build those muscle fibers, have more strength, and have more muscle growth. There are a couple of ways to do that. It doesn't have to look one way. You don't always have to lift just a super heavy weight. Number one is just getting progressively heavier. So you can certainly go up in weight. If you have a 20-pound that you're able to use for a leg exercise, maybe you get a 25-pound set, or you figure out a way to hold 2 weights at one time to increase that load and maybe do the same number of reps. You can also do more reps. And I think the data really shows that anything under about 60 seconds, when we get near to fatigue, will build muscle. So if you're able to pick up a 15-pound weight and do 6 or 7 bicep curls, as your muscles grow, don't keep doing 6 or 7 bicep curls. Maybe you do 10, or maybe you do 12. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a bigger weight. It could be more reps, especially if it's within that 60 seconds or less time frame. When we get above about 60 seconds, we are really working our endurance muscles, which again, there's nothing wrong with developing endurance in our muscles. But if your goal is muscle growth, which we really want to emphasize in perimenopause and menopause, then this progressive overload of either lifting a heavier weight or increasing the number of reps gets you to that progressive overload so that you can actually build muscle.
And you're saying like muscle building, another term people might have heard of is muscle hypertrophy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one of our challenges at midlife is we all kind of tend to get this menopausal middle, it's sort of like I had an hourglass figure and now I'm SpongeBob SquarePants kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
To change that metabolic shift, to restore metabolic health, we're trying to get more lean muscle mass. So
Yes.
that's kind of the name of the game. So that's when Kate's talking about progressive muscle overload and building more muscle. You might have heard of muscle hypertrophy. We're trying to get more lean muscle so that we're metabolically healthier, also protecting our bones, also protecting against falls, all of the other wonderful consequences that come with having more muscle.
And we will lose, if we are not actively working on it, on average, we lose about 8% of our muscle mass in our 40s and 50s and 60s, and then even more percentage beyond that. So that's a lot of muscle mass. So in a sense, we are just trying to keep up and hopefully even improve, especially if we haven't had a history of strength training in our younger years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that I love your phrasing of progressive overload, because I think one thing I take away from that is when we are static, right? You may be moving, and like Kate says, like it is great. Any movement is great. We are not shunning. If you're moving, that's
Mhm.
fantastic. That you've already developed a habit, we just want to build on it. But if you're doing the same workout over and over and over again and you're not making changes, you're not going to progress. And I think I fell into this trap. I think that I kind of, even though I've exercised for most of my life, when I go into a gym with a bunch of guys and they're grunting and they're throwing down weights, like I kind of get in my own little corner and nobody look at me and whatever. And it wasn't until I really got a trainer where like we really started to making progress, because I was doing what I was comfortable with, and now she makes me do what I'm not comfortable with. So I love that. Progressive overload is where it's at. And Kate,
Yes.
do you mind sharing? Because I know you've done some online programs. Like, what are you doing for your own health?
So I am currently doing Evlo Fitness. We've talked about that on the podcast. We don't have any relationship with Evlo Fitness, except it is what I've enjoyed. It is started and run by physical therapists, and so I like that they're really joint friendly. I feel like for someone who tends towards a pulled trap or sore muscles, this feels really aligned with what my body needs. But it also has me lifting heavier weights than I have ever lifted in my life, but in a way that feels, again, I have progressed. They are not telling me to pick up a 25-pound weight on day one.
Hmm.
They're leading through, hey, we're going to do this number of seconds, try a weight that you feel fatigued at the end of this set. And so over time I've been able to go up. I will say Stacy Sims also has I believe it's called Power Happens
Right.
course. I've not done that, but I think she is absolutely using these principles of progressive overload, getting muscles close to fatigue so that muscles are actually being, especially in these perimenopause and menopausal years when it's harder, muscles are being stimulated enough to actually grow, which is the goal.
And I think you kind of also alluded to that we want what we're doing to be efficient, right? And
Mhm.
so if we're really trying to change our metabolic health, and you have 30 minutes to go for a walk or you have 30 minutes to lift weights, you are going to change your metabolic health faster by lifting weights than just going for a walk, right?
Yes, yes,
And
absolutely.
we all need efficiency, because it's just there's a lot to do and not a lot of time.
Yes.
That is so important. And I think when I kind of started off in saying strong over skinny, one of the things that I think you and I both see is that when we start getting that SpongeBob SquarePants physique, the first thing a lot of us do is start to restrict our calories more. But if we're trying to build muscle, we need to be having adequate nutrition to feed muscle. And
Mhm.
so Kate and I have talked about this a lot, but it really bears repeating that we want to make sure you're getting enough protein and enough fuel in general, right? So I see a lot of women that have hit midlife and they're coming in and they're saying, I'm having 1,200 calories a day and I'm working out every day. And I'm like, well, no wonder you're not losing weight. Your body thinks it's starving. Right. And then,
Yes.
like, Kate saying you're setting yourself up for injury because you're not fueling your workouts.
Mhm.
So we're generally advising people to try to get a gram of protein per pound of ideal body weight. And this is a little kind of hairy. It feels a little not great for me, because ideal body weight is maybe not a metric that Kate and I might label that way. But the way that ideal body weight is set out is that the first 5 feet of a female person are 100 pounds, and then you give them 5 pounds for every inch of height over that. So if I'm 5'2", my ideal body weight is 110 pounds.
Mhm.
The last time I weighed 110 pounds, I was an OBGYN resident. I was about to get married, I lived on Diet Coke and lean cuisines, and the labor and delivery was on the 7th floor of the hospital. So I was trying to lose weight for my wedding, and I went up and down the stairs eating lean cuisines and Diet Coke, right? I would not describe that as optimal health. So I just kind of want to make the caveat about ideal body weight may not really be ideal, but I'm going to try to get 110 grams of protein in a day.
Mhm.
And that just kind of is a good metric. A lot of times we just ask people to try to get in 100. It's a really good starting place, especially if people are, starting at 30 or 40 or 50 a day. Start with
Yes.
100. Like,
Yes. And
anything you want to add to that?
well, my encouragement, if someone is eating a lower protein diet, that feels really intimidating. It can also cause GI upset. And so they can end up feeling constipated or bloated. So my words are always, this is a marathon, not a sprint. How about next week you add one food that has protein in it to your diet? Get creative over time. Think where you would like to be in 6 months or a year, not that you need to change your entire diet in a week or a month. So slow and steady. The other thing I think that's really helpful is to think about variety. We have a handout that we will give patients that shares different ways to get protein in our diets. And I love things like hemp seeds that I'll put sometimes into a smoothie or something like that, or even on top of a salad or whatever I'm eating for lunch just to boost the protein intake. So there are lots of nice non-meat ways, for people that are comfortable from an ethical standpoint or for other reasons eating animal products. We do find that helpful, especially when it comes to getting enough protein in. But there are a lot of other ways to get protein in besides a chicken breast or a steak. So some variety really helps with getting an adequate protein without feeling overloaded on chewing pieces of chicken breast.
Absolutely. And I love the kind of slow and steady wins the race. And we will include protein handouts for everybody in the show notes so that you've got access to those too, because there are some nice little cheat sheets. Like,
Mhm.
nobody wants to be living in MyFitnessPal calculating all day long.
No.
We kind of talked about eating enough. I think another really important point is sort of managing the stress of exercise with kind of the stress of maybe other pressures we're having. So can you talk a little bit about stress regulation and overexercise?
Yes. So we know that exercise is a form of stress. It can be a very healthy stress on our body in the right dose, but we also think, in perimenopause and especially in earlier menopause, these hormone shifts are making our body more sensitive to stress. They're making us somewhat less resilient to stress. So we need to think about our exercise and modulate the stressor that it is. Most of the time, we will increase stress hormones through exercise, and our body is generally able to then reduce those stress hormones and we go back into that rest and digest state. But longer exercise, especially high intensity exercise, can be dosed in a way that is too much in a certain season or hormonal fluctuation in our life. And so it can lead to more chronically elevated cortisol, which in turn can really promote fat storage. It can reduce our immune function, can certainly make us feel really frazzled. It can disrupt sleep. So it ends up having a result that is not a net positive. So when I'm talking to people, I want to say, hey, think about how you're feeling after exercise. If you do an hour-long boot camp and have a blast, but then you go home and you feel like you need to take a nap for the rest of the day, maybe that got your cortisol too high and you crashed. If you do that and you feel like you are on edge all day, maybe it just sort of got your cortisol up high and your body really can't bring it back down. I encourage people to think about what else is happening in their life. If they have a particularly stressful week, if they haven't slept well, if they are having a work stress or something is due, maybe it's not the week to push the hardest you can in the gym. So it's thinking about the whole life, thinking about what's going on, and trying to modulate exercise. I will say I love high intensity in perimenopause and menopause. It is really great for stimulating the reduction of visceral fat. but small doses are key. And I think this is sometimes where we think more is better. If a little bit is good, more is better. And no, we're talking like 15, maybe 20 minutes, one, maybe two times per week. You can also do something like sprint interval training, which Stacy Sims loves, and that's really my preference. And that is a 30-minute all-out sprint with about a 2 or 2.5 minute rest, and then doing maybe one more of those, maybe two more, and doing those 1 or 2 times per week, depending on your fitness level. So a very small actual amount of exercise.
So sorry, 30-second sprint with a 2 to 3 minute rest.
Yes, yes. So the total amount of time that you are moving is quite short.
Yes.
But it's still signaling the, mitochondrial growth. So it's helping with cellular energy. It's also stimulating that reduction in visceral fat too. So you're getting benefit, but you're not getting that sustained, prolonged cortisol that may affect you negatively later on.
I just want to say that what you kind of mapped out, like when I turned 50 and I'm like, okay, I've got to get 15 pounds of menopause weight off. And I was exercising 6 days a week. I was swimming 3 days a week for a mile in the morning before work. And I was lifting weight 2 or 3 days a week, also in the morning. And I was getting more and more tired as the summer was going on. My swim times were getting worse and worse. And I'm like, what is up? I was sleeping, I was fueling adequately. And the long, slow cardio of swimming the mile, even though it was outside, I was with my friends, there was a lot of like social, emotional things that were great about it. I'm not swimming this year. I'm lifting weights and I'm doing hot yoga, and that blend works for me. But
Yes.
I love the sprint intervals. My trainer will have me do a round of weights, and then she has me run as fast as I can around the track for 2 laps and then recover. And then we do another set. And it's kind of fan because I can't run fast for a very long time, but I can run fast for a short amount of time. And it feels good, right? You're
It
like
does.
getting on some of those dragons.
It does. I think it's kind of fun, and then you're done, and that's really nice. And you sort of alluded to this, but the not taking enough rest, so not having enough recovery days built in, really can end up biting us later on. And so just really listening to what's going on with our body, what's going on, are we feeling wired? Are we feeling exhausted? Are we feeling edgy? Is our performance worsening instead of getting better over time? Those are all signs that we might be impacting our cortisol in a way that is not overall a positive. And so I think keeping a flexible approach to exercise, not I have to do this every week. Stacy Sims, and I'm alluding to her a lot because I've been taking this course, and so I want to give her credit where credit is due. But she actually recommends that women in perimenopause and menopause take a deload week every third week. So that is her training schedule. As she says, you push hard for 2 weeks, you lift heavy weights, you do some hit or sprint interval in small doses. And then you take a deload week where you work on mobility and flexibility and just low intensity movement. And then you go back. And so I am not enough of an athlete, quite frankly, to be doing as much as she's recommending. Her course is really for athletes or for people who really want to improve, time or fitness. I'm just in the season of trying to stay afloat a little bit, but I love the encouragement of the rest and recovery as part of the training schedule.
Yes, and as we're aging, mobility is so important, right? And so in that deload week, maybe you're working on balance training, maybe you're working on agility, maybe
Mhm.
you're working on core.
Mhm.
It doesn't have to be balls to the wall every single time.
Yes.
And I think, I just kind of want to say, if you were like me and we're just like, I'm so frustrated with this weight, I'm just going to keep trying harder. It really took me the whole summer to be like, I didn't think I was over exercising because I wasn't exercising 3 and 4 hours a day, right?
Mhm.
I was exercising for an hour a day. And for me, with my level of stress at that time, that was too much. It was the wrong kind of exercise.
Mhm.
So, the game board has changed at midlife. We may have some of the same pieces, but the game board on which we're playing has changed.
Yes.
And so if you can have that flexible mindset to be like, okay, I got to switch it up. It took me an entire summer of kind of beating my head against the wall, but now I'm like, okay, I just need to make plans to go hiking with my swim friends or invite them over for dinner, but I'm not swimming this summer. So yes, I just want to reiterate that, yes, that makes a lot of sense to me, even though it took me a while to see it for myself.
Mm-hmm.
We've touched on sleep some. I mean, obviously, sleep is how we recover, and it's so, so, so important. So if we're trying to build healthier muscle, recovery is a huge part of that. Sleep is so important to that. And so just very, very briefly, I think one of the most basic things we could do for sleep hygiene, and Kate says this a lot, is trying to kind of set a regular morning time. But one thing that I think Kate said is, like, she said, sunlight before screen light, right? And so, are we paying attention to our circadian rhythms? Do you get up 2 hours different than when you wake up on the weekday versus the weekend? And are we really prioritizing sleep? So if we're trying to train to get stronger muscles and to get stronger in life, are you staying up scrolling on your phone? That's not recovery, right? That's just noise. So really prioritizing sleep is so important if we want to make these gains and not get injured.
Agreed.
Kate, can you talk a little bit about creatine? Because I feel like it's so trendy. Talk to me about how you use creatine, when you think it's appropriate. Like, give us a little context, because I feel like it's it's really popular right now.
It is. I've had lots and lots of patients ask me about it in the past few months. What's happening during perimenopause and menopause is we are having accelerated sarcopenia, which means muscle loss. And I alluded to that earlier. This is something that will happen with aging. It will happen because of some hormonal shifts that we have going on, unless we are actively working against it. So creatine supplementation, when combined with resistance training primarily, has been shown to maintain muscle strength, maintain muscle power, and improve lean body mass. So those are all things that we really want during these transitions. We want to preserve, our metabolic health. We want to stay independent. We want to make sure we're able to do the things that we want to do as we age. The studies on short-term gains are that people using creatine at about 5 grams per day gain between 2 and 4 pounds of lean mass over the first couple of months of use. The data on, continued use is more in terms of muscle preservation. And so you may not continue to gain more muscle mass because you are on creatine, but you're tending to preserve more muscle mass, which also is something important. You may have some additional gains, but that's what really the literature is showing, that the most of the impact here is on maintenance after the first couple of months. So that's one reason I think most women would benefit from this. I get a lot of questions about side effects. You probably do too. Is it going to make me bloated? I've heard creatine makes me bloated. It really should not cause bloating or water retention at the dose that is recommended for females, which is between 3 and 5 grams daily. So make sure you're getting a good quality product. Make sure you're getting something that is actually creatine. But there are really few, if any, side effects in terms of that water retention if we're using it at a lower dose.
Right. I use the Thorne one because Thorne fuel, they supply the Olympic team. And I'm like, okay, if it's good enough for the Olympians, I think I can do that.
Yes.
And I just put a scoop. So 1 scoop of the Thorne creatine is 5 grams. And I'll put that in with like some element, and that off to the gym I go.
Yeah.
I don't do it every day. Maybe I should be doing it every day. I do it every day I go lift. I don't necessarily remember to put it in my water bottle if I'm going to yoga. But I love that you're bringing up the GI side effects. I think we really see more GI side effects when people are using like 10, 15, 20 grams a day. That's when we're really going to get a lot of bloating and gas, those kind of issues.
Yes.
That's not really what we're recommending.
No. It also probably has some bone protective effects too, which is really cool. And so, if someone's like, I don't really, care about the muscle, we have a conversation about why muscle might be important. But when we think about bone health, that is probably a place where creatine is showing up and having some benefit too, in terms of supporting bone remodeling, so that bone growth. And again, when combined with resistance training, it's going to be more efficient. There's also some data on neurocognitive protection, mood support. And so, this is something that has benefits far beyond just growing muscles. TBD, I think there's going to be more research on this too, which is cool. And I think most people would benefit from taking it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, maybe we could kind of close out just to kind of, I think people know this, but to make sure that they know this, we've been really focusing on preventing muscle loss and building muscle. But some women will come in and they'll say, I don't want to look bulky. I don't want to look like a man. So can you kind of talk us through that? Because I think there's still some kind of misinformation out there around women and weightlifting.
Yes. If a woman has physiologic levels of testosterone, so even if we're giving testosterone replacement therapy to someone, that is our goal. And unless someone has different personal goals, if someone is trying to keep female levels, we are staying in that range, which is less than 60, maybe a little higher than that. Women are not going to bulk up with testosterone levels like that. Again, we're losing muscle really pretty rapidly through our midlife. And so we are really trying to, number one, preserve muscle, but number two, trying to provide ongoing protection. You might notice some muscle definition. If that feels bulky to you, I understand. I think we've lived in a world where we've had thin limbs and wispy legs and arms really promoted. So if that may feel bulky to someone, and I get that, that's not been the message that we've received very strongly from society, that muscles are beautiful. I think the tide's changing a little bit, and we really, want to emphasize the benefits, but also you're not going to develop muscles like a man with much higher testosterone would.
Right. Yeah. So we're, with physiologic doses of testosterone, you're not going to really bulk up. We want to be toned and defined, right? But that's different than bulky. So I think
Yes.
that's fantastic. Well, this has been so great, Kate. This is something you can start at any season in your life, right? I am stronger at 51 than I was at 41. I'm actually stronger at 51 than I've ever been in my life. And my goal at 52 is to be stronger than I am at 51. And so, if you're like, well, I didn't start this young, or, I'm 63 now and I'm already osteoporotic, it is not too late. We can always improve our health. So, I mean, Kate, did you grow up lifting weights?
No. And then I did a lot lighter weights for a long time, a lot of walking. So I was active, but it's been really the past 3 or 4 years that and then, I lifted weights and I thought I was building muscle, but I definitely was not getting close to failure. So it's been really the past 3 or 4 years. I feel the same way. I have more muscle than I've ever had in my whole life. And my goal is to keep getting stronger as the years go on. So
Yeah. And I also just want to say, I think the other thing, when I look back on my 40s, all of those classes that I took tons of classes at the Y. Don't get me wrong, I love the Y, but I don't think in those classes I had the confidence to slow down and pick up the right set of weights for me. I don't think I knew what the right set of weights was for me. In that environment, we were doing a lot of repetition with maybe a lot lower weight. And I always grabbed the same weights because I was using eights, and that's what I'd identified, right? And so you want to be exercising in an environment where you can make progress, and you can also personalize it to where you're at.
Yes, that's a great thought, great tip. And you can do something different than the instructor's telling you to do. If you want to do 6 reps or 10 reps and be done while everyone else is finishing 20 or 30 reps, that's okay too. So, take where you are, try to implement some of these progressive overload and maybe some other strategies to begin to see some muscle building.
Stronger over skinny.
That's
Let's
right.
do it. Have a great day, all. Thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to Menopause Rescue. We hope you've enjoyed this podcast and it helps you create some time and space to make this the best half of your life. If you've enjoyed this content, please leave us a 5-star rating and review. This helps other listeners find this resource and rescue and restore their health. If you enjoyed this topic and want to learn more, check out our resource guide for this episode. If today's podcast resonated with you and you want to take a deeper dive, check out my educational resources. We offer basic membership, which is an archive of over 100 videos on menopausal topics ranging from bone health to libido. We add to this archive every month, so the resource becomes richer and richer over time. If you're looking for a menopause expert and live in North Carolina, take our free online class and see if we're a match for your needs. It's called Are We a Good Fit? And is a quick and easy way to learn more about our practice and what it has to offer. Hey, this is Dr. Watson. This is just a friendly reminder that this podcast is for general information purposes only and does not constitute the practice of medicine. No doctor-patient relationship is formed, and any information you get from this podcast is considered educational only. You should make medical decisions with your healthcare provider. The content of this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice. Listeners should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice for any medical condition, and they should seek assistance from their healthcare professionals.